And as we arrive at the final two chapters of the book of Joshua, every person is in their land. All the tribes have their inheritance. And we're going to start to look at Joshua's farewell address and his actions before he dies. So I'm going to read through the majority of chapter 23 because I want you to see with the biblical language, the context and the instructions that Joshua gave to the children of Israel. So let's go. From verse 1. Now it came to pass a long time after the Lord had given rest to Israel from all their enemies round about that Joshua was old, advanced in age. And Joshua called for all Israel, for the elders, for their heads, for their judges, and for their officers, and said to them, I am old, advanced in age. You have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations because of you. For the Lord your God is he who has fought for you. See, I have divided to you by lot these nations that remain, to be an inheritance for your tribes from the Jordan, with all the nations that I have cut off as far as the great sea westward. And the Lord your God will expel them from before you and drive them out of your sight. So you shall possess their land as the Lord your God promised you. Therefore, be very courageous to keep and to do all that is written in the book of the law of Moses, lest you turn aside from it to the right hand or to the left, and lest you go among these nations, these who remain among you. You shall not make mention of the name of their gods, nor cause anyone to swear by them. You shall not serve them, nor bow down to them, but you shall hold fast. There it is again. You shall hold fast to the Lord your God, as you have done to this day. For the Lord has driven out from before you great and strong nations. But as for you, no one has been able to stand against you to this day. One man of you shall chase 1,000, for the Lord your God is he who fights for you, as he promised you. Therefore, take careful heed to yourselves that you love the Lord your God, or else, if indeed you do go back and cling to the remnant of these nations, that these that remain among you, and make marriages with them, and go into them, and they to you, know for certain that the Lord your God will no longer drive out these nations before you, but they shall be snares and traps to you, and scourges on your side, and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land which the Lord your God has given you. Behold, this day I am going the way of all the earth, and you know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one thing has failed of all the good things which the Lord your God spoke concerning you. All have come to pass for you. Not one word of them has failed. Therefore it shall come to pass that as all the good things have come upon you which the Lord your God promised you, so the Lord will bring upon you all harmful things, until he has destroyed you from the good land which the Lord your God has given you. When you have transgressed the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and have gone and served other gods, and bowed down to them, then the anger of the Lord will burn against you, and you shall perish quickly from the good land which he has given you. All right, so this is the first part that Joshua speaks to the nation. It is more likely that it is just the leaders, the elders and the heads and the judges and the officers of the tribes that come to hear what he has to say. And as he communicates it to them, then he now communicates to the rest of the people. He's giving his address and he starts off by giving the glory to God. And all the way through, you see him attributing glory and honor to God. It is God who has fought for them. It is God who has brought them out to bring them in. It is God who stands with them. And because of that, Israel has known victory all along. So as God encouraged Joshua to be strong and courageous, Joshua is also encouraging the people to be courageous. Be courageous to do what God has asked you to do, to drive out the inhabitants, destroy everything that, comes up against God, and not to make a partnership with those who remain in the land. Don't marry them. Don't, allow them to stay, because it will turn your heart. It will turn your heart. So they have to obey the law of Moses. They have to follow the instructions of the Lord. They have to be obedient as his people. And he is very clear in his instructions that, listen, if you don't do this, you are going to turn. It's not that you might turn, or it could happen, or perhaps you may turn. If you don't obey God, you will turn. And for us too, if we don't obey the word of the Lord, if we don't follow the teachings of Jesus, we will turn our hearts from him. And that is not what he desires of us. So the people are being reminded of the importance of having God at their center, physically, but also spiritually. And that brings us over to chapter 24. We are at the last chapter of this beautiful book. And here, after they have heard of what they are required to do and how they will have great success, now Joshua renews the covenant at Shechem. So from verse 1. Then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and called for the elders of Israel, for their heads, for their judges, and for their officers, and they presented themselves before God. And Joshua said to all the people, thus says the Lord God of Israel, your fathers, including Terah, the father of Abraham, and the father of Nahor, dwelt on the other side of the river in old times, and they served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from the other side of the river, led him throughout all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac. To Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau. To Esau I gave the mountains of Seir to possess, but Jacob and his children went down to Egypt. Also I sent Moses and Aaron, and I plagued Egypt according to what I did among them. Afterward, I brought you out. Then I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and you came to the sea. And the Egyptians pursued your fathers and with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. So they cried out to the Lord, and he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, brought the sea upon them and covered them. And your eyes saw what I did in Egypt. Then you dwelt in the wilderness a long time, and I brought you into the land of the Amorites, who dwelt on the other side of the Jordan, and they fought with you. But I gave them into your hand, that you might possess their land, and I destroyed them from before you. Then Balak the son of Zippor, king of Moab, arose to make war against Israel, and sent and called Balaam the son of Beor to curse you. But I would not listen to Balaam, therefore he continued to bless you. So I delivered you out of his hand. Then you went over the Jordan and came to Jericho, and the men of Jericho fought against you. Also the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. But I delivered them into your hand. I sent the hornet before you, which drove them out from before you. Also the two kings of the Amorites, but not with your sword or with your bow. I have given you a land for which you did not labor, and cities which you did not build, and you dwell in them. You eat of the vineyards and olive groves which you did not plant. Now therefore fear the Lord, serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Serve the Lord. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Now, I got to be honest with you. As I read through these verses, I'm getting choked up on the inside. And the reason why I'm getting choked up on the inside is because of the faithfulness of God. As Joshua is recounting the history of Israel, yes, it's a special moment because he knows he's about to die. And we have not seen so far that the Lord has highlighted a successor. All right. So as Moses had a successor of Joshua, we don't see Joshua having a successor highlighted as yet. But what we're reading in this is how God has so set things up to be a blessing to his people. He brings it all the way back to Abraham and how, his family served other gods and he brought him out. And one by one, we see how God has been so faithful to his promise, to his covenant, how even in the midst of the darkest times, God always had a plan. And It is not that Israel was so wonderful and so great that he just decided to choose them and bless them, but it is because God is so wonderful and so great and he chose to shape Israel to be a blessing to them, and then through their lives have that blessing go to the rest of the world. And as we have walked with the Israelites for the last 6 months, right, to get to this point, we've been intimately involved as we read the history and the accounts and the records of what they went through, and not just the action, but also the emotion and the mistakes. Moses missing out on entering into the promised land because of his disobedience. People who have lost their lives because they choose not to obey God. There's been highs and lows, ups and downs. It's been a journey so far. And now they are being reminded that all of this is to point them to God. He says to them, listen, you're in a land with houses you didn't even build. You're eating out of the olive groves and the vineyards that you didn't even plant. I've done this. I have done this. You have received victory and possessed this land that I've driven out the people from. I have done this. And so Joshua gets to this beautiful part and he's saying to them, listen, you've got to choose. You've got to choose once again. I'm not going to be here for very long, okay? You've got to choose. If it seems evil to serve the Lord, okay, if that's too much for you, then choose today whom you're going to serve, whether the gods that Abraham's family served, or the gods that the Amorites and Canaanites served in the land that they're in, and some of the people are still serving them because they haven't driven out everybody yet. Choose. But he says, listen, I've made my choice. For me and my house. And he's not just talking about a physical dwelling, but for his family, his community, we're going to serve the Lord. They've made the choice because of the faithfulness of God. And even recently, I was sharing with someone that so often when we look at the Bible or we talk about faith, it is from our view, our perspective, and our lens. We have our life's story, our life story, and we are fitting God into it. So when God gives us a blessing, when God allows us to achieve and to accomplish and to become, then yay God, right? But it's another thing to look at everything from God's point of view. This is God's story, and we are found in God's story. And we think back to Joshua when he has an encounter with the commander of the Lord's army. He says, listen, are you for us? Are you here to cheer us on, to deliver us, to give us victory? Or are you for our enemies? And the answer that was given is no. I just love it. It's just a great answer. He says, no, I'm not for you. I'm not for your enemies. But as the Lord, the commander of the Lord's armies, I have come. So basically saying, are you on my side? Are you on the side of God? This is God's story. And as we continue through all the other books, through Judges and the rest of the books of the Old Testament and the New Testament, you will see that this is God's story. This is God's doing. And we have the privilege and the honor to be part of his story. And you know what's so wonderful about that? Because at the end of his story, we win. Anybody who's on the Lord's side cannot lose because God knows no defeat. So be encouraged today as we read the final words of Joshua, that the Lord will open our eyes and we would encounter him in a new way. That God, we're not trying to fit you into our box. Because listen, our dreams are too small. Our greatest inventions cannot contain you. But Lord, help us to fit into your story and see that we are so connected. As I sit here teaching this to you, thousands of years after Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Moses and Joseph and Joshua, we are connected to that story. And that's what makes the Bible so real, so relevant, because it's only one story and we are found in it. So Joshua is letting them know, you've got to choose. You've got to choose. He's made his choice. His family has made their choice. And now it's up to every person to make their choice. So it's a great historical account. I encourage you to reread it, and you will see of all the things that God has done for the Israelites. And I pray for even for you that even after you and I are gone, someone will be reading our life story and how we dare to believe God and the great things that God did in our lives. Now, it won't become a Bible, but it will become a book of information to share with our generations that we were on the earth and we were in the story of God. So they are to fear the Lord with authenticity, sincerity, with truth. And if they chose not to fear the Lord, not to serve the Lord, then they were actually responsible for what happens to them. All of us, my friends, worship something. All of us, whether it's money or it's fame or it's people or it's our reputation or ourselves. Some of the biggest idols on the earth are ourselves, right? All of us worship something. And Joshua is reminding us today as we read, make a choice who you're going to worship. And the best choice is to worship God. The best choice is to come into a relationship with God through faith in Jesus Christ. The best choice that you could ever make. So as Joshua gives these instructions, as Joshua bears his heart, and we see the heart of God there, Israel responds and says, listen, we are going to serve the Lord too. We make our choice. We are going to serve the Lord, right? But Joshua comes back and he cautions them against making a light commitment or saying it flippantly or just saying because it's the moment. He says, you cannot serve the Lord for he is a holy God, okay? So he's not discouraging them. He's caused them to really see what they're making a commitment to do, what is really involved and what is really part of a choice to serve the Lord. And well, they respond again that they will serve the Lord. They will serve the Lord. From verse 24 it says, and the people said to Joshua, the Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and made for them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. Then Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God, and he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. And Joshua said to all the people, behold, this stone shall be a witness to us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord which he spoke to us. It shall therefore be a witness to you, lest you deny your God. So Joshua let the people depart, each to his own inheritance. So after challenging their acceptance of the law and acceptance of obeying the Lord, they said, yes, they're going to obey. And then he makes a covenant with them. And one of the interesting things about this part of the scripture is that he writes these words in the book of the law, and he took a large stone and puts it under the oak that's near the sanctuary of the Lord. And he says that this stone shall be a witness, for it has heard all the words of the Lord which he spoke to us. So the stone is there as a memorial of this moment. In time to come, they'll remember their covenant based on seeing this stone near to the tabernacle of the Lord. But the other interesting thing of this is that the stone is a memorial, but it is also actually a witness because it hears the words of the Lord which he spoke to us. It hears. Can a stone hear? Yes. Why can a stone hear? Because in the beginning, when God created everything, he spoke the world into existence. So everything has the ability to receive sound frequencies, to hear. We may not understand it perfectly in our science as of yet, but the stone is actually able to hear. There's a witness, a memorial, a physical representation as a reminder of what it is we have said today, and also it has actually absorbed the sound waves of this moment. And it's a beautiful, beautiful record of this special moment between Joshua, God, and the people of Israel. And after it's finished, everyone goes back to their own inheritance. And I love that. They go back to their inheritance. It's nothing like when you actually get your inheritance in your hands. Before, in a will that you have an inheritance, it's a promise, it's a promise, it's a promise. But when the person passes and you get that inheritance, it's a whole other thing. Now you have it in your hand to spend it, to use it, to live in it. So they're going back to their inheritance.